Hello everyone, and welcome back to another video. In today's video we're going to be talking about how to fly a VOR approach in the Boeing 737. Now this is the PMDG 737 and specifically the 800 variant. So without further ado we'll just get right into it. So to start with, you're going to need your charts. I'm using the Jefferson charts from Navigraph, highly recommended. Or you can use ChartFox if they're available to you as well, which are completely free from the web. So I would get your final approach chart up. This one is Nice Côte d'Azur, VOR B runway 22 left or right. I'm doing 22 right specifically. Now there's a few things you need to do before you commit to this approach. Like any approach, ILS, RNAV, VOR, whatever it is, you need to do your minimums, and in this case it's 1,500 for 1,488 feet. But because this isn't an LNAV or VNAV minima, we must add 40 feet to this number. This is just standard to airlines. Airlines can stipulate how much you add to this, but most airlines do add 40 feet to this if it's not an LNAV and VNAV minimum. And you can see that by looking at this thing here where my mouse is. It says MDA, which means it's not an LNAV or VNAV minima. So you must add 40 feet to your minima. So you'd input your minima in. I've already done it. I've added 40 feet as you can see. And you'd do it here. See, it's 39, 40. With this little knob which is lighted up in blue. You also need to make sure you set your barometric pressure, which is of course your position above sea level. You must ensure this is correct, otherwise you are going to fly at incorrect altitudes. I could go on a lot about that, but to keep it simple, you're just going to fly incorrect altitudes. So a way of checking that your minimums are correct is by heading over to your flight displays. You can do this in the first officer's one or the main one, but I'm going to do it to the first officer's one just in case. So you'll be in something which looks a bit like this. You know, I'm zoomed out quite a bit, so I can zoom back in like that. And essentially all you're going to do is you're going to ensure that your EFIS. Here you're going to click this center button, CTR button twice, once, twice, and you're going to get this little thing here. Now if you zoom out a bit until you can find the runway, see there's the runway. The runway should lie on that green line. If it's above your or below your QNH is incorrect, and you can't commit to flying this approach due to accuracy reasons. So ensure that is all set. And you see I'm coming at 5,000 feet, so I need to set my barometric pressure. Seen as that's what I got. Alright, 3,000 feet is set for the next constraint. Look at your charts for your constraints. I have started this a bit late, so I do apologise. I'm going to go a bit quick. So yeah, I need to be at 3,000 feet at Badpo, and then we'll fly down from there. This is an offset approach, so it won't line us up directly with a runway, but that's all fine. It just means you can't do an auto land. So at the transition altitude, which is 5,000 feet for me, you would go from standard to your QNH, whichever that is. You can look at that on your EFB. On the PMGG, click home, arrival, and it will be a Q, and then there'll be a number. See, mine's 1015, or it'll be an A and then a number, depending on where you are in the world. So you also need to set your course and your heading. For me it's 223, of course you can find this in your charts. For me, this VOR approach doesn't tell you in this chart, but it says refer to final approach course, refer to chart 13.1 alpha. So you go ahead, go to 13.1 alpha, which is this one here, see 13.1 alpha in the little red box, and I'll see that the heading is 223 for both runways, which this approach can be flown. So 223 degrees is my course and my heading for the runway. Final approach heading basically. So we've got our everything set. You need to tune your VOR, of course. To do that, you just head to here and then input the VOR. I've already got it set. You'd type in the number. It'll be at the bottom one. You'll be able to see what you're typing in the bottom, and you just press this to, of course, activate that VOR to show on your display. See VOR1 AZR, which is the VOR which we need to tune as set by the charts. VOR AZR 109.65, which is the frequency you would input into the little computer down here. You'd put it on both sides for VOR 1 and 2 so that you can see where the VOR is. So, yeah. You'd also do your standard things like requesting your descent winds, which I've already done in the forecast page. I've already done it. And you'd also want to manually input your QNH into here, which is really important for this kind of approach. I've also put some fixed rings in. This isn't mandatory, but it helps out as a visual reference on where you are, how far you are from the runway and waypoints and things. And yeah, so I've done a few 5 mile, 10 mile, 25 mile fixed rings just so I can get a visual on where I am. So you'd want to put your landing lights on, you want to put your engines to continuous. You'd do that at 10,000 feet, but because I've been recording this, I haven't done it. And you'd also put your seat belts on. And that's pretty much all you need to do. Landing lights, pretty much procedural. Those aren't anything mandatory to the approach, but they are mandatory for safety reasons, which a flight simulator doesn't really need, but of course if you want to fly it realistically, that's what you'd do. So we're pretty clean to fly this approach now, really. We've got our QNH set, we've got a minimum set. We've made sure we added 40 feet to the minimums, since it's not an L11V now, as stated before. We've got our VOR tuned, because it's a VOR approach. QNH is correct, as shown by this little chart tool thing in the 737. Final approach course is set, heading is set, 223 degrees. L11V nav are enabled for this approach, because we're not getting vectored, because I'm not on VATSIM or any ATC controlled unit. See, we're flying above the sea. I'm heading on to my final approach chart now. As you can see, you can't see because the chart isn't really extended enough. But I am coming up to the waypoint of Neras. As you can see, my plane has just popped up there. So this means we're ready to fly the approach. So we're just going to basically follow the autopilot in. Essentially, we need to get our landing performance done. You should have done this at 10,000 feet or a relatively decent point before this final approach, before you went to the final approach chart. So arm 22 right, import weather 1015, as we can check there. Autobrakes 3 will do, because that gives us more than enough room to land. 5,499 feet out of 8,432 feet, which is the runway length. Autobrakes 3, landing flaps is 30. And I would recommend you manually take all the speed now, because VNAV isn't very good at doing speeds, I'll be honest with you there. So we're going to take manual control of the speed here, as it should do. Yeah, it's starting to come down. Struggling a bit because of wind, probably. So flaps 30 and SPX 3. No, that's fine. All fine. Let's go back to the final approach chart. We'll get autobrakes 3 set for the landing. We'll get flaps 1 initiated to fly this approach. Standard, you do that on any approach. Flaps are important in helping you in your descent. And yeah. Flaps 5 can be initiated now because we are at low enough speed. Hoping it doesn't get us into an overspeed because this wind. Might just put it down to 195 to be safe. Because chances are it's going to say I'm overspeeding. By the chart it says we need to be at maximum of 200 knots, so we can't be any faster than 200 knots at D100 Tango, Delta 100 Tango. And at Badpo we need to be at 3,000 feet minimum to fly the approach. I'm going to record this landing on my flight recorder. There we go. Approach V. Oh god, I need to set the approach VREF. You do forget a lot of things when you're doing videos. Alright, make sure your approach VREF is set. Of course, all that stuff is completely procedural on any approach, so I tend to not go over it, but of course I'll go over it briefly. But really that's something to really be explained in ILS, because that's the easiest approach, so it's easiest to learn in an ILS. That's for sure. Of course, I've already done an ILS approach on this channel. If you haven't seen that, then you can head to my channel, playlists, and PMGG 737 tutorials, where this video will also be located. All my tutorials for takeoff, cruise, landing was an ILS approach, however, so I'm doing the different approaches now. This is a VOR, RNAV is next to come. And yeah, soon enough we'll know everything, and then I'll move on to the A320 tutorials in due course. So what is our final approach speed? Is 3,000 feet. So 3,000 feet will be our final approach speed, and it's our next altitude. So 3,000 feet is set. That is all good. Now I don't see an altitude past there. I do need to look at the other chart, because final approach says refer to this chart. So at D5.5 we need to be at 1,500 feet. Mandatory, so that means we must be there, otherwise the approach is probably going to be messed up. I'm going to get the speed down to 180 knots. Actually 175 knots to be safe. And I'm going to get flaps down to 10. Flaps can of course be seen by this little measure here, or you can just see what flaps you are by looking at the lever. See where it flaps 10 there? That's what's set, and that's what's actually enabled. So that'll show you where it is. It's coming down or coming up. And things. So as soon as we got onto this final approach chart, we'll enable the approach mode, because that is needed in this approach. So let's see, for our speed, so we need to be at 175 for 30, so we can definitely get down to 15 at this point, because we're more than slow enough to do that. We are just using VNAV and LNAV to keep it simple. As I told you in the other tutorials, LNAV and VNAV are probably the easiest to know, with level change being another easy one, but I feel like so long as you program the FMC correctly, and if you do, you would follow my tutorial correctly, VNAV will work fine. Absolutely fine. Probably be easier than level change, but level change just means it'll just get you to that altitude, but it won't control your speed or anything, unlike VNAV would do. So 3,000 feet are above, so we can't be below 3,000 feet by the next waypoint of Badpo, which is all fine, and then it'll bring us onto the runway, which will be somewhere up here. Yeah, I see the lights just over there. I can see them flashing, so we're definitely in visual of the runway now. Just gonna get that to be down to 170. Of course, to manual control your speed on VNAV, you just have to press this button here, speed intervene, little black button, and you can control your speed on VNAV while VNAV controls your rate of descent. And if you don't press speed intervene, that's all fine. VNAV will just control your speeds. However, on an approach, VNAV can be a bit too sensitive. And yeah. Because this is an offset approach, this means we can't do an auto land, as I said before, so you must disconnect the autopilot at very least by 260 feet above the runway, because yeah, you should really do it a bit before then, because it is an offset approach and not an ILS or a yeah. But that is the absolute minimum. If you do it under there, you could end up into real bad consequences in your landing. Oh god. What's that noise for? It's probably something stupid. I'm going to get the landing gear down. I'm going to get flaps to 30. Simply because I think that button, that noise, is far too sensitive in the sim. That is the warning saying we haven't set up things correctly. But I bet you, because I've set flaps to 30 and landing gear down, it's going to come off in a moment. See, it's gone off now. It's far too sensitive, I think, and that's just a limitation of the simulator. We need to get down to 1500 feet now, so that can be set. And we can get down to 160 knots. Maybe a bit too late on that descent to 1500. Hopefully it'll be alright. So yeah, if you do get that warning noise, don't worry, you probably haven't done anything wrong. I know I haven't done anything wrong. I feel it is a bit too late to get the landing gear early. To get the landing gear down, because you should really do it at 2500 feet. There's nothing wrong with doing it a bit higher, but really it shouldn't warn you unless you're below 2500 feet for the landing gear. And flaps should be at 30 when you get the landing gear down, however, usually, typically. Not always, but typically it would be. Yeah. So what is our final approach speed? 146 knots, I'll take that as. Or 141 knots, I should say. How many miles out are we? I can't see, obviously, because I'm not on a... so we aren't appearing on this approach chart yet, so that's fine. As soon as we enable the approach mode, which will be in a minute, we have to set the go-around altitude, like any approach. But we won't do that until we enable final approach mode. Approaching minimums. Approach mode enabled. Glide path. Glide path is enabled. MCP speed is enabled. 140 knots can be initiated. Glide path, FAC, MCP speed. That's all good. VOR approach has been captured. 4 DME to the runway. Diamond is in the middle, so we're on track to land. Great. Just gonna make sure I've got my chart in clear sight. And I'm going to zoom in to the chart so we can see the runway a bit better. So I'm gonna disengage the autopilot now because, well, this is an offset approach, and done that a bit late really, but it's all good. 22 right is the most close to the land, so yeah. I'm also using an Airbus side stick to do this to save costs, not Yoke, so it's quite hard to steer in some ways, though it is completely enjoyable and completely doable. So just going to head in. Be a bit steeply mined. that. It's quite hard, that approach. There we go, landed. Versus. I do think I was a bit low for that approach, but it was completely doable. It's not perfect, shall we say, but not every landing is going to be perfect, especially when you're trying to explain it at the same time. It's certainly not the easiest thing to do. The auto brakes to off. Of course, there's an aircraft coming at me, because FSLTL traffic being its usual self. It's no surprise there is no air traffic controlling them, so nor me for that matter. So yeah, definitely was a bit low on that approach, but at the end of the day that was quite a hard approach, to be fair. Out of all the offset approaches I've done, that has to be one of the hardest, because the autopilot essentially disengages. You need to disengage the autopilot quite far out, so it isn't the easiest in the world to do. But nevertheless, you landed it. You landed it on the runway. You know, all that to be accounted for, and you should now know how to do a VOR approach. Which, you know, great. I mean, you know, you're not going to always perfect them, and I will be honest with you, that was my first time flying this approach specifically. Not VOR approaches in the sim, but this approach specifically. So I wasn't aware of what was going to happen there. So yes, I was a bit low, but at the end of the day I didn't land into the sea. I landed on the runway at least, and that's what matters. You landed it safely, basically, and that's really the best thing you can do. But nevertheless, the purpose of the tutorial is to show you how to fly an VOR approach, not how to perfect a landing. So I think for that, this tutorial succeeded. Do let me know your thoughts, anything that could be improved on. My landing, for one of them, apart from that maybe. But yeah, that's basically it. So you just taxi to the gate, normal taxiing things, you know. Thanks all for watching. Yeah, and I'll see you in the next video. Hopefully this was helpful, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye all.